All right, everybody, welcome to Behind the Rise. We just finished up an episode with Craig Ballantyne. For those who do not know Craig, he is probably one of the OGs in the internet marketing space, business space, productivity as a whole. A lot of the new books and the new gurus and people that you see online, coaches, consultants, and that learn from Craig. He had a crazy publication with email marketing. Really something that if you dig back and read his old school books, you'll realize that pretty much a lot of the stuff in internet marketing or productivity is around him. In this episode, we talk about productivity, discipline, ways to maximize your morning routine. It's really a jam-packed episode of really tactical tips that you can use in your own life and become a more disciplined and more productive person. So hope you guys enjoy. Listen to the podcast.
All right, folks. So we're here with another episode of Behind the Rise. We have a good friend of the show, Craig Ballantyne. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Hey, this is going to be a lot of fun, guys. Thank you.
I'm super looking forward to it. And like I was telling you before, I've been a big fan for a long time. I've always struggled with discipline and, just being on a certain schedule for a long time. And I know that's kind of, what you spoke a lot about before. So I'm excited to, get into everything.
Well, let me turn it on you here. And so, that's one of the reasons why I wrote my latest book, because when someone says they struggle with discipline, I mean, if you said that, if 1,000 people said that to me, there'd be 1,000 different specific definitions. And, I think this generic term of discipline kind of holds us back, because when we say we want to be more disciplined, we're always referring to something specific to us. And if we just say general discipline, then that's when you can go off and start chasing all of these things we see on the Instagram Explore page, which don't actually solve the acute problem. So I have a question that I always ask people is, what's your specific definition of success when you say that you want to be more disciplined?
Okay, so that's a great point. So where I struggle, I mean, we're gonna do a little
deep.
therapy.
We're going
right off the jump
session.
therapy session. Yeah. So where I struggle with the most discipline-wise is on diet and macros. I have a hard time staying disciplined on that particular area. Other exercise, cardio I don't like doing too. So that would be I tell myself I'm going to do cardio certain days a week. I skip it most days, but I always lift and I eat generally okay, but not 100% disciplined. That's been my issue.
Well, so then the question becomes, tell me what really matters here. Is it that it matters that, you eat according to your macros, or are we asked after a specific outcome? Because in most cases, people are after the specific outcome. And if it's the specific outcome, then let's just reverse engineer, because there are a lot of approaches that work. Is there an approach that can, combine with where you're good, your strengths, and get you the specific outcome that we're looking for?
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of where it gets fuzzy. So I might think it's discipline, but maybe I haven't found the approach that works, to achieve the same result, like you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And we could go down rabbit holes, and we can come back to it later on if you want. But that's when I wanted to bring that up, because that is a common phrase that people use. And, it could be I want to have more impact. What does that mean? Impact is such a generic term. I want to be more disciplined. The best people figure out specifically the outcome that they want, and then we reverse engineer and work backwards as to the steps to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember even when listening, to your show before, and, it was all about morning routine, right? A super disciplined routine. But I always remember you saying that, you reverse engineering to what you want, and then you create your routine based on that. Is that correct?
Yeah. And through the self-reflection and introspection, and this, can go with the dieting stuff, is that, everybody's different. Everybody has different, chronological and biological habits. And even with our nutrition, we respond, certain people respond better to certain diets and certain trainings. And so again, if we just go back and look at our past behaviors and our past peak performance, and we reverse engineer, that day I was super dialed in, I was super focused, and I was very productive. Well, what happened on that day? Was it the time I got up? Was it something I did the day before? Was there planning and preparation in advance? Was it just that I got up earlier? What was it? Did I not go on social media first thing? Did I not check my email? And then go, aha. And that's the classic term that everybody wants to get 1% better. That's how you do it. But you go back and you review the game tape. Because you guys know who Phil Heath is, the bodybuilder guy?
Yeah.
Okay, so Phil Heath spoke at Bedros Keuilian's first event after COVID, and that's what he said on stage. He said something really powerful. It was really cool. It's so cool that I put it in the book. And he was talking about how the year before he won the first time, he came in second. I don't know if he came in second multiple times, but Jay Cutler won again. And so it was Jay and Phil Heath on stage. And when they called out Jay's name as the winner, Phil said, when I watched the highlight or the replay, I exhaled with relief. I wasn't mentally ready. And it was by watching that game tape, like I get chills telling that story because I think it is so powerful, because it's like, oh man, if people would just watch the game tape of how their day goes, they could see that, there's something triggering them at this time, or there's certain distractions at this time that get them off track. And if they just go back and go, okay, well, if that thing is getting me off track, how can I set up a system so that that thing doesn't get me off track? And then tomorrow I have the system in place. It works pretty good. I had a much better performance. I can refine it. And now I can remove that blockage, that obstacle from my life, or from the marketing in my business, or from my dieting distractions, or whatever it is. And you just get rid of those things systematically. And that's how you get to that level of peak performance where you're world champion.
I absolutely love that. I mean, that's a great way to look at, like an analytical way to look at it, instead of just saying, I got to be more disciplined, I got to be more this, and you get overwhelmed and you don't know what to do. But by analyzing your day, it's funny, I think I did that subconsciously recently. I cut out breakfast over the last 2 weeks because I noticed that the days I don't eat breakfast, I have more energy throughout the day, and I'm less hungry throughout the day. The minute I eat breakfast, I'm starving all day. So as soon as if I don't eat breakfast, I'll eat one meal for lunch, one meal for dinner, and I'm good. So I've noticed that, and that was just one little tweak I made based on that.
And then honestly, that problem may then solve the macro problem, which then may solve the body fat problem, which gets you the specific outcome in the end. So it is that introspection, self-reflection, which, because today we're so reactive, because there's so much going on more than ever, and the social media gets us attuned to the fact that there's so much going on more than ever, that it's very difficult for people to step back and do the thinking and the strategy work on their own lives that really sets them on a path for greater results.
100%. That's such a good point. Even with social media right now, I get so confused throughout the day. I'm I start in the morning carnivore, I'll do macro dieting by lunch, and then dinner I'm you know what, I'm going paleo.
Yeah, lost control.
And then overnight I'll watch a video, I wake up vegan. So it's in a day, it's you can get so confused and you don't know which way to go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I have an issue. I just cannot hit my proteins every day. I'm so short, by 50, 60 grams. I was telling him that. And since I looked at that, I'm okay, my main objective, instead of looking at all my macros as a whole, I'm I just need to focus on my proteins for now. I just got to hit this first to start. Mm-hmm. And now I kind of reverse engineered, and I talked to Lucho. I'm I'm just going to double up on my protein in the morning. I'm going to double up on my protein in the afternoon, with a shake. And now I'm in a way better shot to actually hit my proteins now.
Yeah, that's exactly to his point.
Yeah, exactly.
Figuring out where that pain point is.
Yeah, it's working backwards to it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the big thing too is the way that I know you, Craig, too, for a little bit of background. You are the first person, which is pretty cool, I think, the first person that got me into personal development. Straight out of college, kind of figuring out what to do business-wise and stuff like that. I came across, I think it was you or Bedros on a podcast together, but I went first business productivity book I read was The Perfect Day, and it was The Perfect Week.
Oh, nice.
Unstoppable. And literally my mom read all the books, and that was that first insight into personal development. It really opened my mind to, okay, there's a different path than most people. And the big part there, I think, is just that coaching element too. We're talking about discipline. I think I kind of want to go back to those early days too, because I know you from that, Bedros' show, and then internet marketing wise, for anybody that's into internet marketing, Craig is probably one of the OGs of that. Email marketing, all that stuff, huge there. So it's kind of funny that we're talking about fitness. But I think coaching is a huge element of this, but would love to kind of backtrack, as I said before, behind the rise. We'll have to kind of dive back for people that might not know you, because I think you've gone through multiple iterations and phases, just to give a little bit of lay of the land.
Yeah. So I grew up on a farm in Canada near Toronto, and where I grew up, what people do is, what guys do is they play hockey and drink beer. They drink beer and play hockey. It didn't matter which one, in which order. You end up doing them both. And that really affected me for the next, until I was about 25, in that I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach in the National Hockey League. That was my goal when I was in high school and in my first few years of university. Also, though, it gave me the bad habit of being a binge drinker. And I kept that going until my late 20s, which gave me anxiety attacks, contributed to the anxiety attacks in my late 20s, because after I left college, I started working as a personal trainer to rich people in Toronto. Awesome, awesome clientele, the richest people in Canada. But I realized that's not what I wanted to do because I'm introverted by nature and I'm much more comfortable behind the computer, writing my books, writing email newsletters to people, creating courses and programs and stuff like that, as opposed to being on the gym floor where most personal trainers are the opposite of me. They love being on the gym floor. They love being extroverted and they get energy from bringing energy to other people. I got exhausted from it. So I got lucky when I was 25 years old and I sent one of my email newsletters to the Men's Health magazine fitness editor. He put it in the magazine, and that gave me what I call critical credibility, which I think is a very important element of almost any business. Because if you have critical credibility, you can use it like a crowbar to leverage and open doors, right? So for me, because even though I was young, I was 25 years old when I had my first piece published in Men's Health magazine. It allowed me to connect with people that were, quote unquote, famous in the industry. Like there's a guy down in your area, a guy named Mike Boyle. I don't know if you guys know that name at all.
Oh,
Body
yeah.
by Boyle.
Yeah, I used to work out with him.
He's a beast.
Yeah, he's a great dude. And so, he was very famous in the industry, and I got his attention because, if this guy writes for Men's Health magazine, there must be something to him. And so I teach everybody, whether you get a column in your local newspaper, whether you get like a 30-second clip on TV, or, even if you have some social media connections, you have to use that credibility to open more doors in your life because you can do a lot with just that single connection. So then that fortunately allowed my online business to prosper. And so I was selling, I don't know how old you are, Costa. I might have made my first dollar online before you were even born. So on January 28th, 2001, I sold my first program, and I sold a Word document, not a PDF, a Word document for $60 now through PayPal. And that was $60 US. And for a Canadian at that time, just like it is now, that was like $600 Canadian. So it was a great, great day in my life. But the key lesson there for anybody who's an entrepreneur is, man, you got to bootstrap it. Unless you're doing like you're building a car factory or something, you need to prove that people want your stuff by going out and selling it. And so if you're creating some type of nutritional supplement or some food, just go down to the local flea market and see if you can sell like a table full of them. If nobody wants it or they think it sucks, then no point in building a website for it. But you need to go out and get that first sale and spend a lot of your time selling early on in your business, because that's business. Most people do lots of other things like start 5 social media accounts, say they have a business and have never made a sale or aren't very good at sales. And that's not going to end very well. So fortunately, I was able to turn my introverted tendencies in love of writing into the sales technique of copywriting, which allowed me to sell a lot more of those fitness programs. I started on YouTube in 2007, have millions of views there, sold some workout videos, but then I got tired of it. And I wanted to make, as Costa said, it was time for a new shift and evolution for me.
Yeah, those early days were crazy. I remember just the podcast, the emails, and all that stuff. It was the first I didn't know how internet marketing worked at all. So even just the opt-in stuff, the emails, the DMs, I'm just like, what is going on here? This is crazy. And I think for people that don't really now being a marketer wise, it's just I'm used to it. So I don't even realize it anymore. I'm opting out. I know this is a lead magnet. This person's trying to upsell me this, but it's kind of like that. You kind of have to peel back that and realize that there's people that built those things that nowadays that people kind of take for granted. So there's so much psychological stuff to marketing, especially if you witnessed and you study old school copywriters, even your day with email marketing. I think Early to Rise was the publication, right, that you bought.
Yep.
As well. That was the first.
Yeah. It's kind of like anything is that, the first time you go to the gym, it's freaking scary. Right. And then, after about a year, you've forgotten more than most people ever know. And it's the same with whether you're running a logistics company or whether you're running an internet marketing company or all the millions of types of companies out there. At first it is scary, but you eventually get to the point where oh my gosh, if people knew how simple this was, everyone would be doing this. So hopefully they don't find out how simple it is, because it generally comes down to making those good offers and following up repeatedly and having some type of sales process. But that was the first phase. And along the way, the irony was, as soon as things really started taking off for me, I had my anxiety attacks. And that was because I was this hypocritical person who was a binge drinker on the weekends. And then, goody boy two shoes, personal trainer Monday through Saturday. And then Saturday afternoon, I'd end up at a Blue Jays game or a hockey game or something, drinking and then drinking till 4 o'clock Sunday morning. And I think mentally that caught up with me. In addition to a few other things, being an introverted type of person, I didn't journal. I didn't know about these tools, meditation and all that sort of stuff that allowed me to process my thoughts a little bit better. And so the way that I describe it is I was like trying to pound, 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag. And eventually that kind of blows up in your face. And it did on January 1st of 2006. I went to the emergency room, walked in, said I was having a heart attack because that's what I thought was happening. And that was the first of two pretty severe anxiety attacks that I had that then set me down a path to figuring myself out. And then that's when the productivity and the systems and the habits all kicked in because I knew the way that I was living before that couldn't continue.
Yeah, on the anxiety stuff I can relate to. So I've had anxiety really bad since I was probably like 6. I probably had my first anxiety attack, and then it went away for majority of my life, and it came back in like my late 20s, 28, 29 years old. So for some people who have anxiety, which I'm sure is a lot of our listeners, what can you give for some tips that when you were going through that, like maybe a couple tips that can get you out the mud? Because there's so many different phases with anxiety, but I know so many people who are just stuck in this rut and they just need like that first step out into like, the light to kind of see that there's a path forward. Do you have any suggestions or tips for those folks?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the most important things that I did was I committed. I committed to turning over every rock. I was not going to take any pills for it. I wasn't going to go to the doctor and ask for medication. I was determined to figure it out. Now, it was a painful experience because the second anxiety attack that I had was the middle of March of 2006, and it lasted for 6 weeks. So for every waking minute, and I could only sleep a few hours at night, I felt like I was having a heart attack. My chest was tight. My heart rate was elevated. I was tingling from the top of my head to the end of my fingertips. It was pretty brutal. And even I would try and go to the gym and I couldn't concentrate. But I realized that something had to change. And one of the things that I learned along the way that I think will be really helpful is a physiological change that most people can do immediately. And this is great for people that are stressed out and not, fully anxious, but just breathing properly was one of the key elements for me getting through it. So if you're stuck in traffic and you're yelling at the person in front of you, you're stressed out and angry. If you flip that and just do something like box breathing, 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, 4 seconds out, hold the exhale out for 4 seconds and repeat that cycle. It calms down your nervous system. And for people with anxiety, that same thing will be very helpful. I had to learn what I was doing, the mistake that I was making that made my anxiety worse was because I spent a lot of time on the computer, I was hunched over. And when you're hunched over, you can't exhale fully. And you end up having these short, shallow breaths, which is like hyperventilating. And that's good if you're going into a UFC cage match and you need to get, hyped up for it. But on a day-to-day basis, breathing like that all the time is not very good. So learning how to do the classic yoga belly breathing was essential for me to learn. And I tried all these things. I did this thing called Qigong, yoga, meditation, Tai Chi classes. I tried everything. I hated them all, but I was turning over every rock. And when I finally figured out this breathing aspect, in the next few months, there was always like the anxiety was like kind of coming back. And if I would flip into that breathing, and it was very difficult at first, but eventually that was one of the major tools that allowed me to overcome it. In addition to some journaling and a lot more gratitude, because it's very difficult to be grateful and very difficult to be generous, giving and helping other people. It's almost impossible to be helping another person and feel anxious, whether that's helping at a soup kitchen or whether that's helping answer a question to somebody on the internet. Anytime I did something that was outward generosity and helping, I noticed that my body calmed down. And that was a huge change for me.
Yeah, that's a big one. There's so many people who just don't even understand anxiety. Like they think I hear people talk to me like, oh, I'm anxious and stuff. I'm like, oh, tell me your symptoms. And they'll tell me, I'm like, that's not anxiety. You're just uncomfortable. Like the way that you felt or how I felt, I had a panic attack that lasted 6 hours. And then it led me down a path of 6 months of really tough place. Like you said, in a constant state of hyperventilating. And I did the same thing you did. I went down a crazy path of trying to learn neurology and reading books, Dirty Genes by Ben Lynch. So Dr. Caroline Leaf, I was obsessed with this process. And the more you learn, it kind of, like you said, like turning over all those rocks, it made it better for me to understand at least why my body was acting the way it was acting, why, maybe my nervous system was reacting the way it was reacting. I was just in overdrive for so long, and just my body just gave up, essentially is what happened. There's just so many people.
Yeah, the one thing that really helped me was the second time I went to the emergency room, they gave me a heart rate monitor, they gave me a chest x-ray, and they said, we'll call you if there's anything wrong. And nobody called me. And then I actually read a book at the same time called Panic Away. And the first 5 words of chapter 2 were, there's nothing wring with you. And I was like, you know what? There is nothing wrong with me. Right. And I'm too busy for this anyways. So that, honestly, right. I got rid of my anxiety that day. Again, it came back a few other times, but I was able to fight it off. But it is like this crazy doom loop in your head that the weird thing is once you get past it and you don't have anxiety, you look back and you go, how on earth could that have possibly crippled me? But when you are in it, man, it is a bad place to be. And it's even difficult to like slow down and breathe. But to the people out there who have ever suffered from it, are suffering from it, understand there is a way out. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And even though it is difficult to do, to make the right changes and to do those breathing exercises, that is going to be one of the biggest game changers for you. But also, don't hesitate to go to the doctor and get, just a checkup. I wouldn't take the medication that they might offer, but I would definitely go to the doctor and make sure that there is nothing wrong with you. And that reassurance from them could also be just the mental switch that needs to be flipped so that you can kind of get down on the path of being calm again.
That's how Dad got rid of his.
Is what?
He got rid of his anxiety because of that.
Because of what?
So my dad would go check himself in the hospital like once a week with his anxiety. He owned a construction company, like really aggressive stuff. He'd get big fines by OSHA, like really crazy stuff. And he would keep checking himself in the hospital, and he would call my mom. He's like, hey, I'm going to the hospital again. And she's like, again? Like, you're fine. One day, what was our doctor's name? The guy who just died.
McCarthy.
One day McCarthy told him, said, listen, you have anxiety. You're going to live with it for the rest of your life. And there's nothing you can do. You're fine. He said, since that day that it clicked in his head, never had it since. Isn't that crazy?
That's interesting.
That was like 20 years ago.
The power of the brain is crazy. Yeah.
Like when you really conceptualize something and like wrap your head like, oh, okay, that's a thing. And that's it. It's just fixed.
There was one other weird thing that I did that helped me out was there was one day I was just sick and tired of it. And I was like, I'm going to make this as bad as possible. And so I tried to
lean into it,
force myself into being even more anxious. And I wanted to see how much worse I could make it. And it actually did the reverse on me. Cause it's like, don't think of a white elephant. And when you do, you obviously you think of one. It's like, I was just trying to make myself worse and I couldn't do anything to it. And again, it's a mind trick that you get into, difficult to get out of. But once you get out of it, it's something simple that can keep you out of it for a long time.
Yeah. The book I'm reading right now says lean into it. So I'm reading an anxiety book right now just to get hear.
I feel like you feed your brain with that shit too.
No. So basically what it says is the more that you try to the more attention you give it, this is what this book is saying. It's almost like the worse it is. You have to lean into the fear to realize that the fear isn't like this boogeyman. So it's like when you watch a scary movie, let's say you watch it the first time, it's super scary. You watch it the second and third time, you know what's going to happen. It's not that scary. So you have to lean into the fear to have this memory correlate that it's not scary. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to relive it to understand that.
Yeah, it's fear, like getting over a phobia type thing.
It's the same exact thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever happened to just saying you know what, I don't have a problem and just keep it moving and try to forget about it.
Well, the problem when you try to forget about it, then you're in the office and you start hyperventilating.
It comes back eventually.
It comes back. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why the fuck.
But you know what, Craig, you said something earlier that what you think sparked it originally was, the fact that you were not living up to what you were saying you were doing.
Right. I was out of alignment.
You were out of alignment, right? So is that kind of what led you down the path of like getting in perfect alignment for yourself and then eventually for everything else?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it did certainly spark it. And so one day, shortly after, when I was like trying to figure myself out, I woke up at like 7:30 in the morning because I was now like able to quit my personal training job and go full time online. And I thought all the cool kids, they work like night owls and then sleep in late, and I would sleep. And so when I say I slept till 7:30, people are like, that's not late. But for me, it is, because I'm the type of person who loves to do everything in the morning. And I noticed that morning I woke up at 7:30. I turned over, had my BlackBerry in bed with me. This is a long, long time ago. And I started checking my emails, and I just felt horrible. And I was like, you know what? Today is the day, or tomorrow is the day I'm going to change this. I'm going to get up 5 minutes earlier so I don't feel anxious already when I wake up. And I'm going to wait 5 minutes longer to check my email. And I did that for a week, and I felt really great. And so I extended it by 5 minutes on both sides for another week, and then 5 minutes on both sides for another week, until within about 6 months, I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning and not checking my email until 9:30.
Mm.
And that was like when I discovered how productive I could be, because otherwise I was trying to like fit stuff in and work late and hit deadlines. But now I was getting ahead, and I was getting ahead, and not just like in terms of my to-do list, but also in terms of my results in my business. And it was a real big game changer. And it was right around the same time that I got my first coach, and he helped me with that sort of stuff too. And that was when, everything just started snowballing in terms of productivity, and me starting to study that stuff and started to teach it to other people as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. So now you're focusing on making yourself better, making yourself in alignment, and then all the anxieties and the fears that you have kind of go away with that, because you're building confidence within yourself too at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. There was still a lot of stuff. Ed Milet has this great little shtick that he does. I shouldn't call it a shtick because it's true to him, but it's like a story he teaches on stage. And we mention it in the book because it's so powerful to us. And, Ed Milet will say that, he believes in God, and he believes that when Ed Milet passes away and he goes to heaven, as hopefully he will, he's going to meet God, and God's going to say, hey, here's the perfect Ed Milet, the Ed Milet of full potential that I created. And Ed's desire is to be that man, not fall short of it. And I think that's a really wonderful way of like measuring yourself. You're not comparing yourself to others. You're comparing yourself to what you could be if you were your best self, if you were your most focused, disciplined, least distracted, and in line with your core values and your moral mission, or whatever it is that you want to describe it as. And when I look back on that time, I was still a long way off, because I was hiding behind introverted tendencies. I was not being my best self in group situations, and I was taking the easy way out, the path of least resistance. I think that's the opposite of playing up to your full potential like Ed plans to. Most people, unfortunately, the human nature is to default to the path of least resistance. And that's what we do, because we're weak by nature. And so it takes a lot of systems to prevent yourself from going down that road. And I still had a lot of work to do, because otherwise, things would, my life might have turned out a little bit different. But I still had a lot of growing up to do from where I was to get to where I wanted to be.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, the way Ed is so good with how he says certain things.
He articulates things
like,
so beautifully.
Like you're talking like that hits, like you're going to heaven, you're speaking to God, and he tells you like, this is who you were, this is who you could be,
who you were meant to be.
And then it just, he's the way he says things, it like
so
hits
good.
so fucking deep.
I thought that story was the best story until like I saw like a video from like 50 years before it, like of the exact same story. I was like, oh shit, Ed Milet actually didn't come up with that. Like,
oh, he snagged it from
I'm
someone
pretty sure he
else?
snagged it from someone. I think there's variations of
Well,
stuff.
he believes the shit out of it.
Yeah,
He
exactly.
I've heard him say it 100 times, and he believes it, and that's a motivator for him.
Yeah.
And
He's
that's
the
where
goat.
he's striving for that perfect version of himself, or the best version of himself. Right. And that's what we all should be striving for, which is super powerful.
Right.
100%.
I have a quick question. So, like, you said you sold your first Word document in 2001, which is crazy. You think that it was easier to start a business back in 2001 compared to, let's say, today's day and age? because it's so like I can't imagine what the landscape different was between 2001 and like now.
Yeah, especially on the internet.
Right.
Well, each of the situations has its pros and cons because if you think about 2001, who was buying stuff on the internet? Like was my mom buying stuff on the internet? No, she didn't buy stuff on the internet for another 10 years because who buys stuff on the internet, right? Like
Right.
it's all a scam. It's all, fortunately PayPal was a simple way, but for a long time, the resistance was, who are you? Are you a real person? I got, are you a real person all the time? Even though there's videos of me on, like when YouTube came around, like here's a video of me. I'm a real person. But when you're just getting emails that show up, and people forget how they got on the list, even though they clearly opted into the list. They're getting emails. Emails didn't have pictures. It was years until YouTube started, so we got a lot of that. Do you exist? Is this a scam? Um, there were so many people who once they bought the program couldn't download it.
Oh,
So out of all of our refunds, we had a very small refund rate, but nearly 100% of our refunds were from people who are like, I can't download this thing. Like, sometimes things were in a zip file. I still don't know how to use a zip file, and I'm like
Right.
50 years old. And so there were hurdles then. Now the online landscape was much more open, compared to the competition of today. But the minds are also much more open today. Like that the lady and her husband who just sold Popley. I think it's called Popley. We buy these
Poppy.
things all the time
Poppy.
from Costco. They're like the sodas. She sold it to Pepsi for $1 billion. Now there's no way that people's minds would have been open to a 25 calorie soda with apple cider vinegar in it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the opportunity, the fragmentation, the niche marketness that exists today is insane
Yeah.
compared to what it was, 20 years ago. So there's pros and cons to both of it. Now, when you say like, is it easier to start? Anybody can start a business. It's never been easier to start it. And quite frankly, the information on how to become better at business has never been more widespread with YouTube. I mean, the library was always there, so there was always free information. But now, I mean, you can buy courses for a small amount of money, but there's so much free information out there that it's not for a lack of information. It remains the human problem, which is procrastination and the path of least resistance. And the reason why people don't have the success in any area of life is because we've gathered information, but we haven't acted on the information.
I can't tell you how many people I know are like that, who they just know all this information and they think they're the smartest, tool in the shed, but they just don't execute on it, right? Like they just
100%.
they just keep building this information and they think that they're getting better, but they don't actually put action or execute towards these ideas and learnings that they create.
It's like dopamine hits though. It's like when you learn something, it feels like you're almost like doing it, but you're actually not. The brain just like gets tricked into thinking that you're actually doing shit. And then at the end of the day, you're like, I got nothing done. I just like watching YouTube videos.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. It's 10%, ideas, in education, 90% execution and persistence,
But you're talking about the access of YouTube. You can get, I swear to God, you
Anything.
can learn more on YouTube if you did a couple hours a day learning a certain trait than you did in 4 years of college spending like $300,000 on a bullshit education. You'll never
I
use.
think those people though that haven't taken action, like there's a circuit inside of them that is broken completely and doesn't matter. It's not like, oh, maybe if they go to a Tony Robbins seminar, that'll be the motivation they need. Like those people just are not wired to take action. Where there's people that just take massive action and don't even think, they don't even plan. And I'm doing a lot of these shows, and I talked to somebody earlier today, and they said, their mentor asked them a question, what's better, what's more important, speed or execution? And the guy said, well, execution. He said, no, it's speed. And you can argue that, but my mentor, Mark Ford, who wrote Ready, Fire, Aim, that's the motto is like, listen, you just have to go and throw a bunch of stuff out there. And people, for whatever reason, will not throw stuff out there. They're either scared of the critics, they're protecting themselves, or they're just, for some reason, they're like a squirrel. They just like to gather stuff and not do anything with it.
Right.
100%. Ready, Fire, Aim. I think it's became more popular now, but like that is probably low key one of the best business books by far of just like literally in the entire landscape. And I know like the book, people like Mark Ford is his real name, but his pen name is Michael Masterson, right, Craig? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that book is literally like the blueprint. And he was the one that you bought early to rise. Did you buy early to rise from
Yeah,
him?
I bought Early to Rise from Mark in 2011 because he was kind of done with it, and then he went on. He's still in the financial newsletter world. He's like 70 or 75 years old and still works like 8 or 9 hours a day just because he's so passionate about it. But I had him speak at one of my events, and he's very different than most of the entrepreneurs these days that talk about team building and stuff. Mark's like, no, you just work people really hard, and if they quit, they quit.
Yeah.
He's from Long Island, so he's got a different approach on it. But he's probably partly right too.
There's a beauty in that, isn't it? My dad is the same way. Oh yeah, my dad is
Just super old school.
Super old school. Which
Yeah.
in the construction world, oh my god.
But that's an interesting point. And even on your shirt, success loves speed. I'm a true believer in that. And I think, even in our business this year, like we're trying to have speed be like a main factor in what we're doing. Like anytime we're making changes and stuff, it's like, okay, we're trying to reduce the gap from idea to like speed on execution. Like that's what we're focusing on right now. Like we have an idea, let's execute, like move as fast as possible.
James Clear has a really great quote. I mean, that guy's just awesome for quotes. And his quote is an extension of this. And it's, if a decision is reversible, make it as fast as possible. If a decision is irreversible, take a little bit more time. That's not the exact quote, but that's the main message from it. And the fact is that there's very few decisions that are irreversible. And the lesson there is, if you're choosing a email software, or you're choosing like the color of your website, or you're choosing, the name of a program, like just choose and move on with it, because no one's going to notice if you come back and you change it later. Like even some of the biggest companies in the world, they change their logo, they change the name of their thing. It's just, email service providers change the outlook of it. Google changes the homepage. It doesn't matter. You just have to go and take action, because otherwise, those people just get paralyzed by it. And that's why we have the success love speed, is because we just want people to decide faster so we can move on to something more important.
I feel like indecisiveness just sucks your energy out. Like when I have a certain topic that I'm like indecisive on, going back and forth with for weeks or days to weeks to months, it just sucks so much energy out of you, doesn't it?
Well, if you like, to your point about like logos and colors and stuff, right? If you just change the logo, right?
Rip the Band-Aid,
change the color scheme, whatever on the website. If you're getting a negative reaction, like you can then test another one like quicker than if you were just sitting there debating internally on which one is going to be better. And then you launch that one, and then you might find out it's not the one that's hitting, and then you switch. But if you just boom, go with it, see what it's like, and then adjust if you need to. Like that's a better approach than sitting there debating it internally for months and months and months, and then finally launching it.
I feel like the younger generation gets screwed up with that. They have these ideas and they're stuck in their own head and they're working their own job, and they just keep finding reasons why not, and poking holes in their own head, and they just never do it.
It's fear of failure is the problem. I think most people have like a no risk tolerance. We're entrepreneurs, they have a high risk tolerance. So if something doesn't work, they're okay with taking the risk. You know what I'm saying? And we're not afraid of failing because we know that's how you get to the solution. Where most people, they have the fear of being judged. They think they might get fired. They did something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, here's a real life example that just happened with us. So we're looking to acquire this business that fits into our business. And the person we were talking to, they're trying to find ways how we're going to integrate properly. Like, oh, how are you going to handle this piece? How are you going to handle this? How are you going to handle that? And we're like, okay, we'll figure that out later. Let's get the deal done, and then we'll figure out how we're going to integrate it later. Like, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to figure out if they were able to build the pyramids, whatever, many thousand years ago. Right. We'll figure out how to integrate your website.
That's his thing. Anytime he tries to talk about a problem, the first thing he says is, "Well, they build the pyramids. We could."
I'll go from the pyramids to the Colosseum.
That's debatable now. Who the fuck built the pyramids?
Yeah, that's why I'm shifting to the Colosseum, because there's no fucking question it was the Romans.
Yeah,
right.
It's a fact.
Yeah. So now
it's the exact opposite of what I see really handicaps entrepreneurs, and I have this little phrase for them: PBPs, which is panic button pushers. And a panic button pusher, when I see somebody who's a panic button pusher as an entrepreneur, I know that they have a limited amount of time. And what that means is that on a day when something goes wrong, and every day something goes wrong, like, they get a refund or an employee quits or something like that, they think the world is ending. Whereas guys like you say, yeah, we'll figure it out. Right. But the panic button pusher, they just hit the panic button, their hair is on fire. And now all of their brain power is going to, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, going to anxiety. And if you're in that state, you have no more mental space for creativity to figure it out. And so I think that's one of like the best tests of whether or not someone's going to make it as an entrepreneur is give them a bit of a catastrophe as soon as possible. Better for that to happen early so that that it's not for you, rather than you go through like one decent year and think you're going to make it, and then have more to lose. Because if someone doesn't have that emotional regulation, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to be a entrepreneur for a long time without getting lucky.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's your ability to deal with problems is the one of the number one traits, like you just spoke about. But I'll tell you, for us, or for me anyway, I think it's almost like a callus on your hand, or like a muscle that you're building, or a skill to deal with. Because in the beginning, when we had first started, 15 years ago, when there was like one problem, that my immediate reaction would be like, that's it. End of the world. We're going out of business.
That's it.
That's
Throw
it.
the hands
We're
up.
fucked.
We're out of here. We're done.
But now it's like it's like daily, weekly, like just massive things, and it's like you just deal with them, and then move your mind over to the next thing, how to fix it, move on. But it's almost like a muscle and callus on your hands that's built up over time that you can, if you have the right mentality, you can work on getting better at that. But I think that's like a skill that can be learned, but only over time and only through real life experience, and only if you make it through those beginning years, or those beginning.
Yeah, and if you have the attitude that we're going to figure it out for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
A real story is a couple weeks ago, I was at my house and it was a Sunday, and I had a quick massage. I was getting a massage. I had like some back pain, some chest pain. So I had
Mr.
a quick
massage over here.
So I called Angelo, and I said, "And it was a stressful week." And I called Angelo and said, "Hey, I'm going to send this this massage lady to your house. Like, I know we got a lot going on." And I saw him super stressed that day, and I was like, "Hey, I'm going to send this lady to your house." And his response was like, "No. Like, I want to eat this. Like, I want to eat the pain. I want to lean into it." He had like a bring it on mentality. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to feel relaxed right now. Like, I want to lean in.
Yeah, I need to feel everything. I don't want to feel this lady touching my fucking legs. I want to feel the pain.
But you had like a bring it on mentality. It like turned into like, I can do anything. I can eat all this. Like, I'll take it all in the chin. Like, I'm ready to go to battle.
Yeah, that's the mentality. When I'm in that mode, I think of it like a wartime general.
Legit.
Like General MacArthur wasn't getting like a back massage. I don't think he was in there like covering his face with like mud, like going to war.
That was a real story. That was only 2 weeks ago.
That was 2 weeks ago. He sent a picture on a Sunday of like a masseuse and like candles all over his fucking house. Like, how weak are you?
Listen, my fiance likes it too. It is what it is.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's get into the book, right? So the newest book, Dark Side of Discipline. So I know we touched a little bit about, in the beginning of the episode, but why don't you get into, just kind of the premise of the book and kind of, what it talks about? Because I know before you were known as the world's most disciplined man, right? Is that the?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, from there to how you wrote a book about the dark side of discipline.
Yeah. So, the world's most disciplined man thing, I'm not David Goggins. I'm not running ultra marathons and stuff like that. People saw me as very productive. They were like, you run multiple businesses and you put out more content than I am. Therefore, you are productive. Therefore, you must be the world's most disciplined man, which is how the whole little shtick came along. What I saw, though, was that while, discipline can be your savior, as it was for me when I was a binge drinker. I was like wasting my life, and I had to put discipline and systems in place to get me up to the level I needed to be. But then you can take good things too far. Any good thing can be taken too far. And what I found with the discipline was, people get on these streaks. They get in these programs where they have to do 18 things and it takes 2.5 hours a day. And that's fine, if you're 21 and you have nothing else to do with your life. But I had a friend that I wrote, the book is written about his story at the start. He already was married, amazing kids, multiple 7-figure business, fancy red sports car, 6-pack abs. Like, you'd look at him and go like, you're doing great. Like, you clearly have your stuff together. And of course he opened up his Instagram one day and saw some workout challenge and he had to go do it. And I'm watching him post all about this. And I'm like, listen, I know that your wife already complains that you work too much. Your business is still growing. So you didn't take the 2 hours a day from your business. So you probably took it from your family. And this is not going to end well. So finishes it up, gets, claps on the back from people on the internet who he's never going to meet, never has met. And then he goes and does it again. And I'm like, cannot end well. And sure enough, when he finished the second time, his wife walked out on him with the kids. And now he gets to see his kids like every 2 weeks. Why? Because he wanted to impress a bunch of strangers on the internet. So what he was doing was he was pursuing good things, like working out twice. Yeah, great. It's good. Awesome. Reading books and doing cold plunges. Those are good things. It's not like he was drinking 12 beers, sitting in front of, TV every night and eating a bag of chips and a pizza. He was doing good things. But by pursuing the good, he sacrificed the great. And that's where there's a dark side of discipline, where we take things too far, where we, in our pursuit of reading a book a week, never get around to writing the book that's inside of us. That's the great thing. Reading a book a week is great, is good, but writing the book that we were meant to write is great. And so many people, because I'm an author, I hear from a lot of people who say, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. I see them 6 months or 12 months later. How's it going? I haven't started yet. And it breaks my heart because I know that they could actually bring something quite valuable to people, but they're too busy chasing all these other little things and letting it get in the way. So me and my business partner and co-author on this book, we came up with this definition of discipline that you won't see in any dictionary, but we think it's the most valuable definition of discipline that you can use. And it is putting a level 10 effort into your level 10 problem. And everything else is just entertainment. So the other week you had a level 10 problem in the business, and it sounds like you put a level 10 effort into it. And that's the only way that you were going to fix it. And that's the truth. And so I challenge people who are listening to this, and I challenge people with my coaching clients to say, what's your level 10 problem right now? I know you've got one. You've probably got one personal, one professional, one for your health. Just write it down. What's your level 10 problem right now? What's the thing that gets you up in the middle of the night with anxiety, or the first thing you start thinking about in a negative spiral in the morning when you're just like, oh man, if I could wave a magic wand and fix this problem, that'd be amazing. What's that level 10 problem? Now, beside that, write down what level of effort on a scale of 1 to 10 are you giving to solving this problem? And there are very, very few people who are going to put even a 7, because level 10 problems are scary, whether it's fixing your marriage or losing 200 pounds or getting out of $50,000 worth of credit card debt. I mean, that is absolutely scary elephant in the room sort of stuff. And people like to ignore the elephant in the room. Then the next step, what you should do, if you're committed to making a change in your life, is just write down all the things that would make it look like a level 10 effort. And I did this recently with my wife because we've been married for 4 years now. We have 3 kids under 3. Our marriage is great. It's a 9 out of 10, but we want it to be like better than 10 out of 10. And so for us, going from great to amazing is our level 10 problem in our personal lives, in our marriage. Because when you have kids, it's a different world than when you're newly married and everything was pretty awesome. So we wrote down about a dozen different major actions that, some of them I could take, some of them she could take, some of them we take together so that we take our marriage to the next level. Now, it was a difficult conversation. It required us both being open and taking feedback and us committing to actually following through on the action items. But we know that our marriage, and since the 2 weeks that we've done it or so, is already improved dramatically. And everybody in the house has been sick, and it's been a little bit more stressful, and I'm going away next week, and we had family visiting, which was always stressful. And we navigated that better than ever because of the work that we're doing. So that's the ultimate definition of discipline that I'm trying to get through to people, and to explain the dark side of discipline, because discipline can be your savior when you need a lifeline in life, but you can also take discipline too far where you become a servant to discipline and it's no longer serving you. And that's when you have to make the changes.
Yeah, that story reminded me of my fiance was obsessed with like some certain health and toxins, and she was making her own shampoo, she was making her own body wash, and she wouldn't eat certain things, and she got almost obsessive on the other way, and she kind of like almost became a phobia for her, and it became a bad trait. Like it was good, like she was doing the good things, but it almost became bad for her because it became too obsessive.
Once it becomes your identity too,
it's classic letting the good get in the way of the great.
Right.
Does it at some point, once you get too wrapped up into your identity and like who you're trying to be, can it be unhealthy? Like what's your take on that? Like how your identity plays into all this?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'm a big believer in the power of using your identity to even be stronger than discipline. But the problem is if you start with the wrong orientation on your identity, like if your identity is, oh yeah, I can do all of these challenges that are on the internet, as well or better than anybody else. Well, that's like not the right identity for you to choose. Your identity should either be around I'm an entrepreneur or I'm a family man, I'm a loving husband. These things. I'm a non-drinker might be another beneficial one. It is for me. Um, you use the identity to make these actions automatic. But if you start down the wrong path, then you start getting into the wrong decisions. And with stuff like that, it's really detrimental when you go too far and you become obsessive compulsive about something, like I was for a long time, because there's a phrase that you have to live the book before you can write the book. And the reason why I know there's a dark side of discipline is because I had an exercise streak of 1,000 days and it was pointless. Like, why am I exercising every single day? Like, just let it go. But once you get so deep into the streak, you have the blinders on and you can't start to think rationally. So what I tell people to do is just back up and run everything through a filter. And you can look at every habit that you have, every decision you make, and just say, is this serving me or am I serving it? So if you get up and you drive 15 minutes to a cold plunge place to do a cold plunge every morning and then 15 minutes back, okay. If you're single and you got all the time in the world and it's helping you and it's giving you clarity and it's stopping you from drinking at night, that's serving you. But if you're married with 3 kids and you're leaving your wife at home with 3 kids under the age of 3 so that you can go and cold plunge for 3 minutes at a local cold plunge facility because you don't have one at home, and then you come back and the kids are screaming and there's, poop and diapers everywhere, then that's not serving you. And, whether you want to post a selfie online or not of you in a cold plunge, it's not serving the family. And, in this season of life, you need to step back from that specific activity. You can maybe go and do it again in the future, but right now it's not the right thing for you. And, that's the thing that is missing from most people's lives. They haven't stepped back, figured out what matters, figured out their straight line to success so they can say no to the dangerous detours of discipline that, often come our way in this day and age of social media.
100%.
I got a question on the earlier we were talking about the level 10 problem with the level 10 effort, to deal with that problem. So if you're somebody who gets like obsessed with fixing that problem, right? Like if let's say you got a problem, and I'll give an example. We had an business issue like a couple months ago. It was a level 10 problem. I'm going level 10 to fix it, to the point where I said, I'm not going to shave. I'm not going to get a haircut. I'm not going to shower. I'm not going to do anything until I solve this friggin' problem. Like, so obsessed that I gave up all my other routines. Like, I stopped waking up at the right time to go to the gym. I stopped, because I was up all night thinking about the problem, writing down potential solutions. Every waking moment of the day was to solve this problem. It was like a level 15 effort to.
But
handle.
The problem it is a level 15 problem. I mean, it's a big one.
I'll tell you though, since I started like shaving and going back to the gym again, I feel better to deal with the problem. But my first instinct was like, that's it. I'm not leaving this room until I solve this problem.
So it's a great question. It's a unique question because most people aren't, at the level that you're at who would even think about that problem. So I had a friend of mine, a former coaching client, and I've never met anybody who stayed up for 72 hours in multiple times as much as this guy. Like if there was a problem in his business, he was not going to sleep until he solved the problem. Now, looking back, I think he would probably agree that he didn't need to do that the problem would be solved, and it might even take just the same amount of time, because if you are only trying to solve the problem in ways that you always solve problems, your brain might not actually be as creative as possible. So it's possible that if you gave yourself the rest and put yourself in novel environments and talk to more people about it, that you may have solved the problem in the same amount of time. Now, we're never going to know that for sure. But I think in hindsight, looking back, it probably wouldn't have been much different if you had not gone to that extreme. But we will never know for sure, except to try it in the future and, try a different approach. Because I think that there's other people there's lots of people who have had significant problems. If I'm a big fan of World War II history. And so I read about Eisenhower and planning D-Day and stuff like that. And I'm pretty fascinated by it. But I would say, like, even though that was a pretty significant problem and, he had to get it right, that he didn't actually use the same type of approach. Now, he didn't, sleep as much as he probably should have, but he just kept to a relatively normal schedule and they figured that problem out in a relatively normal way. So you can have massive, massive problems and still figure it out without maybe getting a little bit too far. But again, this is all kind of sort of theoretical, but I would challenge you next time, maybe there's another way to do it, that instead of me trying to figure it out sitting here at the same desk where I try and figure everything else out, go for a walk in nature. Because if you look at the smartest people, maybe the most prolific and biggest thinkers in history, a lot of them did what you would consider not working. Like, Charles Darwin, what he would do is he would write for a couple hours in the morning and then go and wander around in the countryside for a couple hours. But the brain actually works very creatively that way. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, we talk about that too. Like, so there was a time period where me and my family, including my brother's house, we didn't go on vacation. There was like a 24/7 work 7 days a week type of thing. Then we all took a family vacation to Aruba, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, we went 12 years without a day off, basically, or a vacation.
Wow. And so old school Italian, like that was built from our dad. But anyway, so then we took this vacation and we noticed like the amount of creative ideas, problem solution thoughts. It's just a new wave of thoughts came in because all the clutter from the stress and the work, whatever, would kind of leave our brains, and these new wave of like thought patterns and creativeness came in to make us think more clearer. So to that point, it's like when you're trying to solve a problem, it sounds like the more you can get into that flow state, the more you can get into that tranquilness is like when you'll start to think more clear.
Yeah, I mean, if you can detach a little bit from it and take a 30,000 foot view of it, but that's different than what Craig was saying originally, which is like just avoiding the problem,
Right.
Like leaving
definitely.
And avoiding it is one thing, but detaching to separate, to clear your mind so you can see things more clearly from the outside looking in is a way of solving the problem, but a different way rather than not showering for a week,
Yeah, I think he also didn't brush his teeth for a bit too.
If the problem requires more inputs, like if it requires you to gather more information, then you will need to work a little bit more, right, to gather the right information. But if the problem simply requires you to take the information that's in your head and connect the dots, then removing yourself from the regular work environment and giving yourself rest and novel environments is probably the better approach. So it may depend on how the problem is oriented.
Yeah.
There's almost like a guilt involved in it too. I think for you too is like the whole hustle culture.
100%.
You think?
Yeah.
What are you fucking kidding me? You went to the gym. You went to the gym today at 12:30, and he kept like telling me like subconsciously like if I was gonna like make fun of him or not. He's like, I gotta go to the gym midday tomorrow.
Well, that's
like waiting for my.
That's the Greek Italian. You're just feel guilty all the time.
Oh my God.
No, it's because my routine is 7 in the morning. I go to the gym. Just like the middle of the day, like my phone's ringing, like I'm bullshit that I'm at the gym in the middle of the day. So I like to get it out of the way early.
Well, I mean, hey, listen, when I was a personal trainer of the richest people in Toronto, they fought over the 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. Well, they fought over the 6 a.m. because the gym didn't open till 6 a.m. And I was like, most of them would say, if you guys were open at 5, I'd be here. And I couldn't understand it for the life of me until later on, where, there are businesses where if you don't get it done first thing in the morning, it's not happening.
Right.
Like the phone is lit up all day long. And I don't love that has to be the way, but that has to be the way, right? There's no other way because you ain't doing it at 7 o'clock at night after your brain's fried. Unless you plan on not sleeping.
Yeah, no, that's how I operate. Like I got to be up early, the gym's out of the way, then I can think clearly, and I'm good until like 12. And then after 12 is when I start being more foggy and not as sharp as I am like in the morning. So I like to get the gym out of the way, and then I'm peak until like noon, and then afternoon I'm still okay, but not as sharp as I was, you know.
Curry, you still big on magic time? I know from the perfect day, like you would argue that the going to the gym first is not the best idea to do.
Yeah, so there's two types of schedules, and many people have written about this, including Paul Graham from that Y Combinator, tech company. Is that there's maker schedules and manager schedules, and if you're a manager schedule, which Angela's got more of a manager schedule, where there's a lot of people that depend on him. There's more meetings. There's more conversations he has to have. He has to be on a more of a regular schedule. If you're on a maker schedule, like a person like me who runs an online business that delivers info products, well, now we don't have to be as reactive to people. So we can really design our schedule so that there's that time of day when it's going to be open and no distractions. So yes, I believe in it. And we all need, no matter what type of schedule we're on, we need some type of blocked off thinking only. And then if you have the self-reflection and introspection, you figure out like there's this time of day when, if I could just be alone for an hour at 10 o'clock in the morning, I could get the most done. In a perfect world, everyone would be able to block that off. Now, in some cases, you're just like, that's the time that everybody always wants to meet. And I mean, these very important meetings, I cannot not say yes to this. I have no choice. Well, then that's what you have to do. And maybe you can get it once or twice per week, which is better than nothing. But ultimately, it's another way of saying deep work by Cal Newport. I just called it magic time because when I discovered it for myself, it felt like magic. It felt like, oh my gosh, in this time of day with no distractions, I can do something at 3 times the speed of what it would take me at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or even 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. There's been so many takeaways in this conversation here that it's crazy. We've learned so much.
And there's I was going to have a quick question because I know you obviously wrote books. I think that would be the most amazing thing ever. Imagine writing a book and like inspiring this many people. What advice do you give that someone who wants to start a book, like how to just start? Like what's that process look like for you?
Yeah, I'll break that down because I love talking about this. One thing you'll notice about the new book is it's short. So I was aiming for 25,000 words because I don't know about you guys, but the number of books that I've bought that I haven't even read and haven't even opened is a lot because I'm a book type of person. So I know what I'm fighting against. I'm fighting against the fact that people buy a lot of books. They have a lot on their Kindle. They have a lot of audiobooks. And so we worked really hard on the cover, just like people who do YouTube work really hard on the cover slide, right? So that cover slide and the cover of a book have to catch people's attention. And so now with people buying most of their books on Amazon, this tiny little thing needs to stand out. So 2 of the most important things in your book have nothing to do with writing the book. It's your cover and your title. Because if you don't get those 2 things right, people are going to pass it over. And it sucks, but it's true. As for writing the book, the thing that most beginner authors screw up is they don't have a good outline for it. And Ryan Holiday taught me this years ago. He said the most important thing to figure out whether the book's going to be good is getting the outline right. And generally a nonfiction book has like 3 parts to it. You kind of introduce the hero's journey, like something that sucks. And then, okay, now we start to introduce some systems and solutions to it. Then there's the meat of the book, and then there's the ending of it. And one of my other mentors, a guy named Vern Harnish, who wrote a very good business book called Scaling Up, he said, again, even if people start reading your book, the majority of them don't finish the book. So you need to front load your book as much as possible. So we front loaded our book. People can read the first 10 or 15 pages, get that ultimate definition of discipline and go, wow, this was really helpful. And then they'll spread the word about it. So that's another important thing for you. Then finally, the last thing, to make it really easy, come up with 10 chapters. And in each chapter have 5 subsections. And in each subsection have 3 questions. So you do all of that first. And then now it's really easy because all you have to do is answer 150 questions, 10 chapters, 5 subsections, 3 questions per subsection. There's 150 questions in your book. You spend 200 or 300 words on each of them. You've got a 35,000 word book. And it's a whole lot easier than sitting in front of your Word document and a blank Word document staring back at you with the title on it. And you just sit there and you have writer's block already. So those are like most of the things I've ever been taught about writing books in 3 minutes.
That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good.
Holy shit.
Yeah, good question, Tim.
I would say the only other thing for really busy people is you answer those questions in an audio note. And then you give it to somebody who can take the audio transcription and turn it into what looks like writing. And you can probably do that with AI these days.
The best audio book on the planet is Matthew McConaughey's.
Green Lights.
Listening to him read his audiobook is like,
Because of his
it's like
voice?
poetic. Yeah, it's poetic.
Audiobooks are skill, man.
Oh my God.
Like for a person like me who's introverted, talking is difficult. And so reading out the audiobook is like running a marathon with my mouth.
Right,
it's like tiring. You're exhausted.
You're like throats cramping.
Yeah, that's the other reason I wanted to keep my book short, because I didn't want to have to record a long audiobook.
Yeah,
that's funny.
But then when the book's done, what happens? You call your publisher. Like, how does that process work? Do you guys have any questions on that? Like,
well, there's a world of self-publishing, and there's hybrid self-publishing, and it's never been easier to do it right. And I worked with a guy named Kerry Oberbrunner. He works with Dan Sullivan, John C. Maxwell, Ben Hardy, all of those guys, and he taught me so many things about the marketing of books that I wish I knew for all the other ones, because he couldn't believe how I have 1,000 reviews on my Perfect Day formula because it's set up so poorly on Amazon. That's not what you want to hear 10 years after you write a book.
Because the book,
it is what it is.
The book buying went from like everything in person, right? Like most things. Now
like
it's
at Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Nobles. Yeah. Now it's to like completely on Amazon and like Kindles and stuff.
Barnes and Noble making a comeback.
I love Barnes and Noble. When's the last time you went to Barnes and Noble?
This weekend.
I've never read a book start to finish. So
You're a joke. 2 weeks ago I went. It was like the best experience ever.
It's the best thing ever.
Walk around.
No,
you
I
see
wish
the
I
covers.
could. I wish I really. That's something I got to get into. I gotta try.
Because then there's like merchandising in the stores. I always wonder, like, why are the ones in the middle like front and center? Like, why are those ones so like marketed heavily more than the other ones? Are they paying Barnes and Nobles more?
Probably through the publishers and stuff. They have.
Yeah, there's payment for placing.
Yeah, it's almost like the market basket stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like slotting fees.
Slotting fees and stuff. Yeah, I'm sure it works very similar. So, Craig, the way we end each episode is we like to ask our guests, what is one piece of advice that you could pass on to listeners, whether they're starting a business or just in general, like a really good piece of advice that you've used over the years that you could pass on?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything in life is easier when you know more good people. So my friend Joel, who I talked about before, who, did those 72-hour all-nighters multiple times, he built a $100 million supplement company and didn't read a book over that entire time. Now, how did he do it? He knew a lot of good people. You can get answers outside of books. I mean, I love books. I'm a bookworm, but that's not the only place that you can get cutting edge information. So he bought 1,000 copies of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Body, so that he could get more time with Tim Ferriss and ask him questions. That's awesome. And he built a business partnership because Joel was generous and well known and had these huge Super Bowl parties and had all these people come to his house, and he solved all of his problems because his network was huge. And everything in my life that has been good, from making money to getting in great shape to meeting my wife, all came because of the other good people I knew. So the old phrase, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, is still pretty darn true. And if you think that you're just going to go about life on your own and, be a lone wolf, well, that is not going to end well. So get out there, get to know good people. I'm introverted and I still was able to do it because the more good people you know, the everything easier in life will be.
That's great.
That's a good one.
That's a wonderful piece of advice.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. So you can find Craig's book on The Dark Side of Discipline on, I'm sure, everywhere, Amazon, Kindle, anywhere. You can listen to it on Audible, I'm sure, right?
Yep.
So, and make sure you follow Craig on Instagram. We'll post his all his contact information below. And thanks for listening.
That was good.